What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Mock Draft Monday video. For today's show, I will be taking you guys through the M&M Mock, which is what Matt Fox and myself have been calling it. We're putting out NFL mocks and rookie mocks onto the website campus2canton.com, and I'm going to go through our one QB rookie mock today. But before we do that, guys, please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon. It would mean a ton to us if you guys could do that. We're really trying to grow this channel more and more as we're bringing you guys more and more content, NFL side C2C. So we appreciate you guys diving into that with us. Now let's jump in to the M&M Rookie One Quarterback Mock 1.0. All right, so as you can see here, we are going to do 2 rounds. I don't think I mentioned that off the top there, but we did 2 rounds in this rookie mock. Again, 1 quarterback. So each of us kind of valued players differently, and we're going to discuss that, or I'm going to discuss kind of what we talked about in the article. Matt Fox did go first in this, and he took Isaiah Spiller, running back out of Texas A&M. And his thought process was on this that running backs are a premium in fantasy and in this draft, and he was going to draft his RB1 to start things off. He thinks that Spiller can be a 3-down back in the NFL and should make an impact from day one. So he went Isaiah Spiller here as his first guy. For me, I was kind of torn between a couple players, as I do agree with him. Mentioned it before on some of the other videos that I really do think running backs are kind of valued highly when it comes to dynasty drafts, because you want, these you tend to build your teams around your running backs and your quarterbacks, especially because a lot of times with running backs, you're getting one contract out of them most of the time. Those 4 years typically, because we don't see running backs go in the first round really anymore. But I wanted a guy who I think is probably the best position player in this, best skill position player in this draft. A guy I think I'm going to have on my roster for a very long time, and that's wide receiver Trey Lin Burks out of Arkansas. He's a guy that I took here at 2. And for me, I think best chance to be an alpha wide receiver. Typically, wide receivers hold value longer than most positions in the NFL. Gives me a guy who should be dominant from year one, likely will have the best draft capital, and I think probably has the best chance to be a top scoring option at his position from day one with just everything he can do. He's definitely a little bit raw, but he's a wide receiver I really like. The number 1 wide receiver currently in my rankings. That put Matt Fox back up here at 1-3, and he went a different route than I expected. He took Drake London out of USC. He said this is a better draft, wide receiver draft than for running backs, which we've talked about. He said he was tempted to take Hall or Walker, but he ended up going with London, who may be the top wide receiver off the board. He had a dominant 2021 season before it was cut short with injury, which he is very right about that. And London is a guy that is very kind of mixed right now in the dynasty community. I'll say I don't really know what NFL scouts think about him. I haven't had a chance to talk to NFL scouts, but in the dynasty community, he is very but people are very torn on him. There's some people who think he's going to be very good because of the way he creates separation within or at the end of his run. There's some people say he can't get off the line. He's a contested catch guy. It's going to be very interesting to see where he ends up falling in the NFL draft. He is in the tier 1 wide receiver ranks for me, though. I really like him. With those 2 players being off the board, I decided to go running back here, and I took my RB1, Breece Hall, out of Iowa State. Excuse me. Hall is, as I mentioned, my RB1. And in this draft, he's a very slim margin right now over Isaiah Spiller. Typically, RBs hold a ton of value in single QB drafts, as I mentioned, and dynasty managers want to build around them. I know a lot of people aren't going to consider Hall a quote-unquote sexy option, but I do think he's a guy you're going to sit in your lineup every single week once he gets into the NFL. He's just going to produce for you. He's really good, very, very talented running back. I think he's getting really overlooked, and I do kind of hate that for him because he doesn't have like one thing, which to me is just a home run speed, people think he's not a good running back. He is. He is very good. That put Matt Fox back up here at 1-5, and he took Kenneth Walker III out of Michigan State. He said he wanted to grab the last top-tier running back option here. Walker burst onto the scene with a massive 2021, and his many traits could lead to NFL success. He's got phenomenal vision and patience and contact balance. And he is dead right about all of that. I mean, Walker, he's got a guy that I think a lot of people are starting to poo-poo here recently. I've seen him kind of dropping down some people's spots. I think he's a great running back. Very curious to see where he goes. Obviously, some people want to hold against him the fact that he wasn't able to do much as a freshman or sophomore at Wake Forest. To me, it was just Wake Forest didn't use him really at all, which didn't make any sense to me. He goes to Michigan State. Mel Tucker buys all in on Walker. And, Mel Tucker does have a road of success, or a path of success here for, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, guys. I'm struggling here, but he's shown previous success with running backs in the past with what he's done, most notably Phillip Lindsay. So I think it was a great spot for Walker to be paired with Mel Tucker at Michigan State, and it definitely worked out well for him. With that putting me back up on the clock here at 1-6, I was very torn looking at different players, but at the end of the day, I decided to go with, thought maybe quarterback here, but again, it's a one quarterback mock. Do you really want to grab a quarterback this early? So I went with my last wide receiver in tier 1, and that is Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State. I believe he has the safest floor of this group, and his ceiling is fairly close to Burks, in my opinion. He is the best route runner in this class and is a polished prospect. I'd be thrilled to get him at the 6th pick. I mean, he is really good. I do think he's the one that's going to fall here. A lot of mocks I've seen London and Burks going ahead of him. Excuse me again. I would really love to get Garrett Wilson here because I do think his ceiling is not much lower than Burks, in my opinion. He is wide receiver 1 overall. I'm sorry, wide receiver 2 behind Burks. But I don't think his ceiling is that far off of what Trey Lin Burks is. And I do think his floor is safer because Burks is still a little bit raw. There's things that he can improve on where Garrett Wilson is already so good at the nuances of being a wide receiver that I think he also can produce day one being in the NFL. But my last tier 1 out of the 3, as Burks and London had already gone, so I'd be cool grabbing him here at 1-6. That put Matt up at 1-7. He went a different route than I expected him to go. Took Trey Mcbride, tight end out of Colorado State. His thought process was, is this too early? Perhaps, but it's about talent and positional advantage at this point. McBride is a dangerous pass-catching tight end, gives the offense the ability to stretch the middle of the field. And I don't disagree with that. There's a lot of mocks that have Trey Mcbride going in the 2nd or 3rd round, and if that happens, he's going to have some draft capital at the tight end position. And he is an offensive weapon. I'd be very curious to see if McBride does go that high and then where he ends up going in rookie mocks. This is kind of the first one QB1 I've been doing with somebody else. I've talked about I'd feel probably comfortable taking him late 2nd. But if you want to take him here in the 1st round, there's still a lot of talent on the board, but I can't say anybody it's a bad pick if he ends up being even what Kyle Pitts was last year as a rookie. Like, we continue to talk about, maybe he didn't live up to the expectations we as the dynasty community set on Kyle Pitts. But if you look at what he did from the NFL perspective and just moving forward, he was really good. He's going to be a valuable tight end moving forward. And if Trey McBride can even do that, that's going to be really good for him. So that puts me up at 1-8. A couple wide receivers here, one running back, but I thought maybe the running back would fall, so I took Jameson Williams, wide receiver out of Alabama. Obviously had that amazing year last year, and I think even with the ACL tear, which did happen in the national championship, which feels like months ago at this point, but it was only a month ago, should be a first-round pick in the NFL. While I'm a bit worried about him producing in just 1 year, he's a great deep threat with a well-rounded game. I understand that he was behind Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson at Ohio State, but Jackson Smith-Njigba started beating him out for snaps as a freshman, and we saw what JSN was this past year, but that's not what he was as a freshman. I am still a little bit worried about that, but the one thing I can say is Jameson Williams answered all of our questions by going to Alabama and producing the way that he did. You can't hold that against him. So I do think he's going to be a first-round pick with what he showed. Even with the injury, he's probably a player you're going to have to wait on a little bit. You may not get a ton of production from him this year as a rookie because he's coming back from that injury, but he's a guy I'd be willing to bet on, especially if he gets a good landing spot. Williams is a guy that I'd be willing to take here. That put Matt back up on the board, and he took a wide receiver out of Penn State, Jahan Dotson. Really good wide receiver. Said in this range, it will be about good value and landing spot. For now, I'm going Dotson. He's a dangerous receiver with phenomenal run after the catch ability. Dotson can make great catches look routine and could see day one draft capital. Could. I don't know that Dotson goes day one, but if he goes day two, he's probably still going to be a first-round pick in rookie drafts because we all want those high-end wide receivers. Dotson's got a big week ahead of us, right? Monday. We got the combine starting up this week. He did not come to the Senior Bowl. There were a lot of rumors, and I'm going to say rumors because nothing was proven, that he was kind of trying to control the narrative based on his size. Let's see. Going to be at the combine. He's going to be measured more than likely. So we'll get to all the answers to the questions we've kind of been waiting for. But overall, Dotson is a very good wide receiver. Back to me, it's torn between two players here, a running back and wide receiver. And I decided to go running back because, as I mentioned at the beginning of this show, running backs are kind of a premium. You want to build your team around them. And I do think this guy, who I was not high on, I'll be honest, he was like my RB7 coming into the season because I was worried about his size, Kyren Williams out of Notre Dame. Had a really good year passing receiving the ball, and did do good as a rusher. He is a very good running back. I mentioned it a while ago. You can look on Twitter because I posted a video about it yesterday. I was on a college football wrap-up show with the great Ray Garvin, and I mentioned, like, his ceiling is Austin Eckler. And now everybody is saying that, and I do believe that is still his ceiling. But that is asking a lot out of him as well, right? Like, nobody thought Austin Eckler was going to be what he became coming out of college. But I do think Kyren Williams can get close to that. He's very tough. Look at his pass blocking. He's probably the best pass blocking running back in this class. And that says a lot for the size that he is. Really good receiving back, and he is also a good rusher. Kyren Williams, complete all-around back. I don't see any way he falls out of round 3, and that matters to me because for me, round 3 is really round 2 draft capital when it comes to running back. So I'm taking Kyren Williams here at 110. That put Matt back up on the board, and he ended up going and taking the first quarterback off the board. He took Malik Willis out of Liberty. He's gotten all the hype since the Senior Bowl, and Matt said it feels like a spot to go upside. Willis may offer just that at QB. He needs to be on fire this far in the offseason and should destroy the combine. Willis should go off the board early in the NFL draft, and his value should continue to increase. And I do agree with that. Excuse me again. Malik Willis, he's got a ton of upside. He's still raw. There's a lot that he could improve on. But if he is able to improve on those things, Malik Willis is going to be a very good quarterback for fantasy. I don't know if I want to say QB1, but I don't see any way he's not at least a QB2 if he's able to work through his issues. Very, very interesting player. I'm very, very curious to see where he goes in the NFL draft. And obviously what he does at the combine this week. It's going to be a big week for him. Speaking of big weeks at the combine, that's who I took at 112. Supposed to be there, supposed to be doing some things. That's wide receiver George Pickens out of Georgia. I think if he goes to the combine, participates in some of the stuff, and just absolutely blows away some of the things that we expect him to do, he's going to end up being a high pick, and he's going to probably go higher than this in rookie drafts as well because he's going to get drafted highly. He's a guy that for many people coming into the season, before spring practices, before he tore his ACL, he was the wide receiver one of this class. He gets injured, and we kind of forget about him, and now he's fallen behind a Dotson, Jameson Williams, Trey McBride even. I mean, I would not take him over Garrett Wilson, but he'd probably be the third wide receiver if it were going off my rankings. Burks, Wilson, maybe Pickens. I have London ranked ahead of him now, but I can understand the argument for Pickens. So Pickens, I expect to do really good this week at the combine and probably get drafted highly in the NFL, and that's going to shoot him up rookie board. So I took a shot on him here. So that is your first round. Isaiah Spiller, Trey Lin Burks, Drake London, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Garrett Wilson, Trey McBride, Jameson Williams, Jahan Dotson, Kyren Williams, Malik Willis, and then George Pickens. Let's jump into the second round here. And again, a lot of interesting names still on the board. If we talk a lot about how this 2022 class is not that good, I do think it's good if it's one QB. If you're in a super flex league, it's not quite as deep. Although you could argue, depending on how you feel about the quarterbacks, it is, because those quarterbacks are going to add different things to the dynamic here when it comes to having, excuse me, adding the quarterbacks into the draft is going to make some of these position players drop down. So let's look now at who Matt went with here at the 2-1. Oh, yeah, at the 2-1, and he went a quarterback again, Kenny Pickett out of Pitt. Someone with the top pick likely has issues all over the lineup. Pickett will probably go early in the NFL draft with an opportunity to play early. He's only had one season of elite production, but it was a phenomenal season. With wide receiver getting thinner here, they get Pickett to pair with Spiller. So just to point this out, we are pairing these picks together. So we were looking at this, Matt picking at the 2-1 was also looking like, hey, who I took at 2-1, or 1-1. So he thought, hey, I got Isaiah Spiller. It wasn't a wide receiver he loved here. I would have taken somebody else, but he decided to go with Kenny Pickett to pair on his dynasty team. Me looking at my team earlier at the 2 pick, I took Trey Lin Burks. You don't love doubling up wide receivers sometimes, but I am a big proponent of taking best player available. And to me, the best player available is David Bell, wide receiver out of Purdue. Wasn't definitely a tough pick for me. And I was kind of really debating between him and honestly another wide receiver. But at the end of the day, I firmly believe in taking the best player off the board, as I mentioned, and Bell will be the Rashad Bateman of this class, in my opinion. Not comparing him to Rashad Bateman as a prospect, but Bateman in this class, and he does everything well, but isn't exactly great at anything. I believe Bell will be an excellent wide receiver too for fantasy. Getting him here, I'm good with. Like earlier in the year, maybe when we were talking about him as the first round, not so much, but getting him in the second round, I'm good with that. I think Bell is going to be a very good wide receiver for the NFL. So that puts Matt back up on the board at 2-3. He takes Chris Olave, wide receiver out of Ohio State. Olave isn't what he once was, but in the right system, there is potential. Staying in for his senior year seemed to raise more questions than answers, but I still think he goes higher, goes in a higher spot in the NFL and produces early. So Matt pairing him with his pick earlier of taking Drake London, so he went double wide receiver here as well. My issue with that, and I've heard a lot of people mention this, that him coming back for his senior year was a bad move. All the rumors were last year that Chris Olave was going to be like a third or fourth round NFL draft pick. If he gets drafted in the second round, it was a good pick for him to come back. That's a lot more money. It's proven through analytics over the years that a second round draft pick has a better hit rate than a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, so on and so forth. I do not think it was a bad move for him. Nobody was talking about, like, we all have hindsight bias now, say, oh yeah, Chris Olave was going to go in the first round. Nobody was saying that though. All the reports were saying that they thought he needed to build his strength a little bit more. He needed to do more. So I don't think that he was going to be a first-round draft pick. Again, a lot of rumors said third round. So if he goes in the second round this year, then coming back was the right decision. It's more money, better draft capital. That's just my opinion. I don't think it was such a bad move that others do. That now puts me back up on the clock, and I took Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky. This was an interesting pick for me. He's an offensive weapon. I am a little bit worried about his actual size. There's been rumors that he's not quite as big as he's listed. He's listed at about 5'10". If he comes in at 5'8", that's obviously an issue. So he could drop some after the combine. He can play all over the field, though, and in the right landing spot could be a fun player to roster. Pairing Robinson with, in my opinion, the best running back in this class was my first pick in Breece Hall. I thought was a home run, especially if Wan'Dale turns out to be what he was at Kentucky, which is an offensive weapon. I hate the next Debo crap, and I'm not saying that Wan'Dale's going to be Debo, but he can be used that way if a team that drafts him wants to. He can play out of the backfield, play in the slot, play outside. Wan'Dale can do it all. He's going to be very fun to watch this week at the Combine, and I'm very curious to see what he ends up measuring and weighing in at. All right. That puts Matt back on the clock here at 2-5, and he takes James Cook, the very, intriguing running back out of Georgia, a guy that, again, a lot of people are very split on. And he said RBs are a premium. Cook was a proficient pass catcher in college and one of the best, and showed ability to run inside and out. I think someone grabs Cook, making him a decent option in this range. And I do as well. There's a lot of NFL people that seem to be higher on James Cook. I'm not. I do think he's a very good receiving back. I do think he can be something at the NFL level. I don't think he's anywhere near his brother, and I don't think he's like RB4 or 5 like a lot of people are propping him up to be. I would take a couple running backs over him, and one of which I did right after Matt took James Cook, and that's Tyler Algiere out of BYU. Running back, was a linebacker, converted to running back, and had a very good career at BYU. Now, he has a self-reported 4.3 40-yard dash. I don't know that actually happens, but he could be an absolute stud at the position. Even if he runs closer to like a 4.5, I still think he'll be valued very highly. He can do it all. He can catch the ball, very good runner. I'm willing to take a wide receiver with upside here to pair with, a running back with upside here to pair with my top end wide receiver. I got Garrett Wilson at the spot in the first round. If Tyler Algiere even hits as like a 2-down back or a guy that sees the field a lot in a good offense, it's a great draft for me right now. I'd love that Garrett Wilson, Tyler Algiere stack in the first 2 rounds. Matt comes back up here, and he's going back to the wide receiver. Well, he takes John Mechie out of Alabama. He said the value is still there at wide receiver, and I'll go back to that and take the former Crimson wideout Mechie. He's quick, elusive receiver, Acceleration, dangerous after catch, has strong hand, and tracks the ball well downfield. So, like the pick, Mechie's a guy who's rising a lot more in the dynasty community, was kind of an afterthought. I really don't have an issue with the pick. I think it's a good fit altogether. Very interesting player. I don't know that I'd take him here, but I can't argue the pick overall. Another running back I would take over James Cook as a guy I took here. That is Rashad White out of Arizona State. Rashad White, I did go receiver here in the first round. So for me, when I looked at it, it's kind of like, I want to go running back. I want to get a running back with upside. White was my best running back left on the board. It is decent rusher, good vision, excellent burst with receiving upside. Again, interested to see what he does here at the Combine. Should have a good week here at the Combine. And I think will help boost his draft stock a little bit. I've seen a lot of NFL people talking about how high they are on Rashad White as well. So guy I'd be willing to grab here, taking him. As I mentioned, I went wide receiver in this round earlier with Jameson Williams. Guy I'm probably not going to get a lot out of earlier this year, but Rashad White, I feel good putting that pairing together. That puts up Matt back at 2-9, and he took the Cincinnati Bearcats running back Jerome Ford. Another running back that figures to go someplace between the third and fifth rounds that's worth a shot in this range. Ford is a former four-star Alabama back to transfer to Cincinnati, but hasn't fully realized his potential. And that's kind of the argument, right? Like, he's looked better the past 2 years at Cincinnati. He shows athleticism. I would not be surprised if he goes to the Combine and absolutely balls out and looks amazing. But there are definitely still some questions about his game. I don't know where he gets drafted. If he gets drafted in the fifth round, I don't even know that I'd take him right here. There's probably some other players I'd take over him. But Jerome Ford is a very intriguing player overall in this process. That puts me back up on the clock. I was kind of debating between a couple players here. At the 110 position, I took a running back. There's some wide receivers I still like here. One running back, but I decided, you know what? At 210, I'm going to take a guy that I think has a really safe floor, really safe ceiling, and is a quarterback. And that's Sam Howe. He's getting a lot of hate. I don't know if it's we've been talking about him for 3 years, so you just you get overloaded with it, and you're just kind of like fatigue bias, I think, prospect bias, where you're just like, you know what, like, let me nitpick every little thing with Sam Howe, because I've seen him be good, and I need to kind of nitpick him. Really good as a freshman, wasn't expected to play. Good as a sophomore, lost almost all of his weapons and his offensive line this year, and still at the end of the day, I feel like was at least decent. Sam Howe, I'm taking him here. I think he's got a safe floor and high upside. Matt, back on the clock at 211, takes Christian Watson, the guy everybody's been raving about since the Senior Bowl, wide receiver out of North Dakota State. Said at this point, it's all going to come down to draft capital and opportunity. For now, going with the receiver that has some top 10, Watson has capitalized on a huge Senior Bowl and could easily destroy the Combine. So he's pairing him with Malik Willis, the quarterback out of Liberty. So he went really heavy on these 11 picks with the Senior Bowl risers. Like Watson, I need to see more of him. I'll be honest, I haven't really had a chance to dive into his tape a lot, but I know there are a lot of people who loved what he did the week in the Senior Bowl, and they feel like he's going to be the next big thing, going to be like a top 4-round pick. Last but not least for me here at 212 to finish out the draft. So I took George Pickens, a guy that I think has a lot of upside at the wide receiver position. Took Jalen Weidermeyer, tight end out of Texas A&M. Really good tight end. Early declare, which is always good for tight ends as well, means he likely knows he's going to get pretty good draft capital. Physical freak, should be decent in the NFL, and I think could be a offensive weapon. Like him a little bit more than like an Isaiah Likely or a Cole Turner, Jeremy Ruckert. Most of these things, Ruckert is a tight end that I'm really high on in this class, Ohio State bias aside, and I think he's really kind of just unfortunately fall to later in the draft, so he's a guy I'd grab later. I like Jalen Weidermeyer's upside, taken here at 212. So to wrap it up, Kenny Pickett, David Bell, Chris Olave, Wan'Dale Robinson, James Cook, Tyler Algiere, John Mechie, Sam Howell, John Mechie, Rashad White, Jerome Ford, Sam Howell, Christian Watson, and Jalen Weidermeyer to close out the second round and this rookie mock draft. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into this. Really appreciate it. Comment below. Let me know if there's players you would have not taken here. You would have gone a different direction. Think we were too high on somebody. We'll continue to do these. If you want to read the article, go check it out. It's on campustocanton.com. $2.99 a month, $29.99 a year. We've got a couple more projects dropping. Telling you guys, if you have any interest in getting on the site, do it now. because things are going to be changing here in the near future, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you guys again next week for another Monday Mock